This is going to be part three of the world of tomorrow today. And I'll be giving some impressions on things, some projections on things, some history on things. And I believe I'll try to give a perspective about the way things have changed in time and where they're probably going in the future. I remember years ago, I lived in Manhattan. I was a little kid. It was the very early 1950s. And my mother took me to a boys' club where they had a free dentist. It was like a free dental clinic. So I was a kid, maybe 7, 8 years old, whatever. And I sat in a dentist chair, and they put straps around my wrists on both armrests and a strap around my chest. And then they told me to lean my head back, and they put a strap around my forehead. And they didn't use any Novocaine, and they used the old-fashioned slow drills. That wasn't what today is a water drill. And there was no Novocaine. And Brunhilde held you down in the chair, and the dentist told you if you were in any pain to lift your fingers. And of course, he was looking in your mouth. He never really looked at your fingers. So no matter how many times you wiggled your fingers, he never saw it. And that was my first experience with healthcare. when I was younger, too, we moved to North Jersey, and the doctors at that time would come to your house if you weren't feeling good. And in their office, they actually had a sign, almost like a garage or a car road service, which meant they came to your house. And it seemed like they walked in with a little black bag, and they would, if you were sick, they would give you a shot, and it seemed like they always had the right medicine. Later on, I found just recently from my own family doctor, I told him that story, and he said everybody get the same shot of penicillin. But from my point of view, they always had something that would fix you up. And I remember my mother would boil a pot of water, and the doctor's tools and his needles and stuff like that would go in the pot, and she would boil water. In those days, they didn't really know about infection control the way they do now. Today, they use an autoclave, which is like a vacuum hot system, and people go to school just to learn how to sterilize instruments and needles. But in those days, you just boiled water on the stove, and it was considered that this stuff was clean. I remember later on in my life, I was at a dentist, and he was drilling my teeth, and I noticed a sign on the wall, and it said painless dentist. And I said to him, it says painless dentist, this really hurts. He said, did you really read the sign? And I said, yeah, it says painless dentist. He said, it's a play on words. It means that I don't feel a thing. So that's what the dentist told me. I was working at Children's Hospital in the early 80s, and I knew the CEO of the hospital. He had gone to school with me. And he told me that they were going to get into managed care. And I said, what's managed care? He said, that's like a conglomerate, like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, CoMed, Aetna, AmeriHealth, whatever. And that's the way that they save money with healthcare for an organization that has a lot of different employees. And it was supposed to cut the costs, but actually it created a bureaucracy, a middleman, so secretarial, paperwork, profit, etc. So in the long run, it actually created a higher cost. You used to just go to a doctor and pay out a few dollars, and maybe you'd have hospital insurance. That's what we had. We had Blue Cross hospital insurance, and you would pay the doctor a fee, and there was no middleman or bureaucracy, and he would just give you the medicines of the time, antibiotics or whatever. In those days, they had a note you couldn't ask a doctor what he was going to give you because he would get offended that you would even question him. In those days, whatever the doctor told you to take, you took, and you weren't to ask any questions because it was an insult to the doctor. So today, I work still at a hospital, and I transport patients, and I also shuttle the staff, and people don't know why the hospital bills are so high. And the reason is that there's an 8-to-1 ratio of patients to staff. See, when for every person in a hospital, there's 7 or 8 workers. There's housekeepers and food service workers and security people and receptionists and nurses and nursing assistants and phlebotomists, people that take blood, and people that run the x-ray machines and the MRIs and the CAT scans, and the nursing assistant and the nurse and the doctor and so forth, people that transport patients and so forth and so on. And you need every one of those people, but when all's said and done, besides the capital investment of buying MRIs or equipment, you also need the rest of the support staff. So you have 8 people working for everybody in a bed. So that's why healthcare is expensive. A lot of people don't understand that. And some of the people make high wages, the nurses, the doctors, the x-ray techs, the one that went to school to learn how to do MRIs or CAT scans or ultrasounds. And you have radiologists, doctors that just look at x-rays, they're MDs, and and you have blood tests and the lab and so forth and so on, a million different people, and you need each and every one of them. So that's why things are so expensive. Now, they'll tell you that socialized medicine's no good because you have to wait for care. But I say to myself, is it better that people have no care whatsoever? Because from working at a hospital, I've seen the stress that people have who do have health care. They have cancer, they have diabetes, they have various diseases, they're on dialysis, and they're all nervous and they're scared and they're worried. And these are people with health insurance and health care. And for people to have 20 million people and just discard them, to me is a travesty. And I remember John Dickerson on Face the Nation asking some of the politicians, you got elected because of the promises you made to the people. Are you going to keep those promises? Not touch Social Security, not touch Medicare, because the Social Security was really designed to last forever. Throughout the years, they've been pilfering Social Security for other things that they wanted to do. They touched it many, many times. They weren't supposed to. But the employers took it, contributed to it, and it came out of the pay of the employee as well. And people call it an entitlement, but they earned it. There was no gift. An entitlement is like somebody getting a gift that they didn't pay for. But the employer and the employee jointly did pay for this. So they're entitled to it because they earned it and they paid for it and they contributed towards it. Now, the politicians, the senators and the congressmen, have their own insurance. They're not on Social Security, they have their own retirement. They don't consider those entitlements. And I remember reading a book as a child. It was A Man Without a Country. And it said, breatheth a man with soul so dead. And I say to myself, what kind of a people would deny people health care? I seen what it looks like when people do have insurance, how scared they are and how worried. Never mind, they don't even get any care at all. Is it better not to have any care? And what were the promises they made? Do they remember what they said? Now, in the future, I really feel that eventually there's going to be big medical centers where people go in and they see a family practitioner who's like the triage person, and he sends them down the hall to the foot doctor, the same building, to the cardiologist, the same building, even if it's on the third floor, to the eye doctor, to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, to the cancer doctor, the oncology doctor, and so forth and so on. And the day's going to come when you go into these centers, and it'll be everything under one roof. Well, in certain cases with the specialists, you may have to come back but go to the same building. There might be 15 foot doctors, podiatrists, and 30 cardiologists, all in that building. It might be a huge complex, but that's the way I see it going. That's going to be our future. But meanwhile, people do need care. They do have to have health care. They do have to be taken care of, and it's a right. It's other civilized countries like Canada, France, England, and so forth. They take care of their people. Their people get medical care. To just toss aside people, I think, is a travesty. And I wonder if the people are going to keep their promises, not to touch Social Security, not to eat up Medicare, and to be more compassionate. We're supposed to be a compassionate country. We're supposed to have a heart. And when I see people on TV and they talk about throwing people off, you can see they're robot-like people. And it said in the book, The Man Without a Country, breatheth a man with soul so dead. And are they really people that have a dead soul? Well, if you can throw people off healthcare, maybe you do have a dead soul.